Hey YouTube, welcome back to another episode of the Lincoln Williams Show. And today,
Anybody like a cookie?
Mom, that says private on the door. Yeah, sure, I'll take a cookie, but read this sign next time. Go.
Alright, sorry.
Close the door. Close the door.
Ready?
Mothers these days. The kind that makes cookies like this. Welcome back to another episode of the Lincoln Williams Show. And today we're going to be talking about the Retron 5 review, basically. So, what is the Retron 5 that you might ask? The Retron 5 is basically an emulation machine, as you saw in the gameplay in my gameplay session of the overall game. Basically, of the overall games that it was playing on, such as Metroid, Castlevania, and Mario Brothers, and all these other games. Basically, what this system plays on what the Retron 5 plays, basically is, if I can get all the stuff together. Regular Nintendo cartridges. This is Metroid, which I have tested on the unit. So let's slide that back into its original case. Super Nintendo games, this is Super Mario All Stars plus Super Mario World, which I did a showcasing in this unit as well. Game Boy games, which this one is Super Mario Land, which I was testing. And don't get me wrong, YouTubers, this game looks really, really, really good up on my big screen. You just don't know it yet because there was a glare in the iPad, and that was a bit of an embarrassment overall. So Mario Land looks fantastic, don't get me wrong. You can change up the color schemes of the Game Boy games, and that is awesome, which I'll talk about that in a sec. Game Boy Color games, and as many of you may know, this is The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages, so it plays Game Boy Color games. And Game Boy Advance games, Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, Famicom, and Super Famicom games, basically. And if you have a Sega Master System converter, you can always play your Sega Master System games if you have a power-based converter to put in the back of the unit. So, let's talk about specs of the Retron 5. Well, what is the Retron 5? Basically, the Retron 5 is basically what you saw in the gameplay is an emulation machine. It's dumping the ROM from the actual cartridge. It's dumping the ROM from the actual cartridge and playing it on there like it was the original hardware, basically. So that's what's basically doing. It's emulating these games. And I'm very happy to report that all of the NES soundtracks, which I previously played on the Retro Duo unit, sounded like crap. I did not want to play on my NES games anymore. They were just scratchy. They were not correct, and there was a correct way to fix the NES audio on the Retro Duo, but I did not want to do it because it had to do with soldering skills. I don't want to do with soldering skills. I mean, I don't want to talk to my brother, let's say Ian or Austin, to fix my unit for me, so I'll buy another unit to fix the NES sound. Oh my gosh, Retrobit, oh my gosh. Why did you do that to your Retro Duo anyway? But I'm happy to report that all NES soundtracks are working properly. Their music selections sound fantastic. fantastic on the system. They sound fantastic on the system itself. And I'm very happy to be playing Metroid on the unit itself. I haven't played it since our last session together on the Retron 5 gameplay session. So I'll play a little bit of this tonight. So yeah. What does the Retron 5 include in the unit without all the game cartridges that you officially need? Well, basically, there is an enhanced audio mode, which boosts the signal of the SNES games or any kind of game that you throw at it, and it basically it makes the music better, basically. But I didn't hear any difference when I was playing, these games. Maybe I didn't hear a difference, but you're going to have to pay really close attention to find what the difference is in the actual unit itself, in the enhanced audio mode. Now, what this system features as well is a graphics filter. Yeah, you can change filters in the game, actually. So if you wanted a pixelated, if you wanted a pixelated game like Metroid, you can go pixelated. Or if you want the graphics to be smooth, such as like a Super Nintendo game, like Super Nintendo games are always smooth, basically with our graphical processor, you can actually use filters to use all the games, basically. Maybe I'll do that in another video, but not right now. I'm very happy about that. You can change the filters of the graphic processor on the system for all of these games. So, yeah, basically. So you can change the filters, and there's also an SD card slot that I have to report in. The SD card slot is, what was it? The SD card slot is for cheats, save states, save files, cheats, updates, firmware updates for the system if you have any problems. I did have an issue every time I would put in a regular, for 2 nights, I had this problem where I had to go in, where I inserted Oracle of Ages, and it would not play because it said error, too many cartridges have been inserted. So I was like, what was the last game that I inserted that was in the Retron 5? So I had to go back to an SNES cartridge, insert that into the unit, take it back out, and everything was working again. It's just, maybe it's a glitch or something like that. It's just with my unit every once in a while. Maybe every once in a while. I have no idea. But, yeah, issues. That's all my only issues of the system is, with that, basically. So, yeah. Basically, what was it? The unit comes with a very awkward controller, basically. The unit comes with this awkward controller. See if it's blinking. Basically, this controller is basically like a Wii remote. It's wireless, so I had it plugged in the whole entire time. Most people, when they're gonna pick up this controller, they're gonna feel like, it's like, this controller isn't for me because of this, the joystick. And the joystick is gonna feel like this. Yeah, the joystick. Basic, and honestly, who would have thought this controller was crap? I mean, I don't think this controller is crap. I think it's a very good controller. The buttons on for the controller, they have L and R buttons, and they have all these buttons basically. And there's a very special feature in the controller menu. The controller menu is basically what was it? You can remap, say, the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance games. This is B, and this is A, basically. And if you wanted to change the control, if you wanted to change the controls to this equals B and this equals A, you can actually do that. And it actually is a really cool concept. But there is an alternative. There is an alternative if you don't want to use this controller. Now, if I was going to rate this controller, what would it be? So, since it saved my life so many times in The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages, in this one boss fight, even though I had to beat the boss fight like 15 times, it wasn't this controller's fault. It wasn't this controller's fault, basically. This controller is actually really good while playing all these retro games. People just don't really realize that yet. They're trying to. They're trying really, really hard to get into this controller. But the main reason is the joystick. Again, the joystick. The joystick feels a little out of place while you're playing some of these retro games. But I say, who cares? Who cares if this joystick feels a little bit out of place? Because I played Super Nintendo games with this D-pad. I played NES games with this D-pad. It works fine. And when I'm playing Castlevania, the mouse buttons feel fantastic. The mouse buttons, it sounds like a mouse, basically, when you're clicking these buttons. Basically. So, yeah. This controller, the final verdict for this controller is an 8 out of 10. Many people will not like this controller, but I do while I'm playing all these games. So, yeah, the Hyperkin Retron 5 controller is actually really good while I'm playing all these retro games. But you don't have to use this controller to pull up the menu screens. See that little home menu right there? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, with these micro switches, you can program to say save state over here and fast forward over here. For me, I like to use filters and fast forward for all my games. That is a very huge plus right there as well. And here is the dock for the controller port right here, so it can charge while it's sitting in the unit. That is very cool, actually. But there's an alternative. I'm happy to report that playing... hold on. I'm happy to report that whenever I'm playing an NES game, like Metroid, it feels natural while I'm playing all these games on an NES controller. This is a generic brand. See, the labels have been, they're not concaved, but this is still a very decent NES controller when playing NES games. And I'm very happy with this because, you can plug in any controller and play it with not only NES games, you could play it with Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance games, and if you're very lucky to play Mario Brothers with an NES controller, you can actually do that with the Super Nintendo cartridge with an NES controller. It actually is really ridiculous in my opinion, but it's really sick. This is really sick right here, YouTubers. So the machine works with NES controllers, Super Nintendo controllers, which is a generic brand of the Retro Duo unit, and Sega Genesis controllers and other clone controllers. Basically, you can plug in any clone controller into this unit, basically. And not only that, you can keep on collecting NES accessories, and all NES accessories will work on this thing, except for the zapper gun, basically. The system will not work with the zapper gun, which is unfortunate, but I'm not going to take off points because of that. Because the zapper gun, it had problems back in its day, and I don't know what's the problem back when they were like doing these back in the day, but you can use other NES accessories except for zappers. I am okay with that, basically. So, and if many of you were wondering, here's the NES plug, basically. So, let's talk compatibility, basically. Compatibility with all of my games. I'm happy to report this is so amazing of Hyperkin. I was so amazed every time I plugged in every single NES game or SNES game or Game Boy game into the unit. It would actually pull up the name and it would run it really, really, really well, like it was the original format of the game. That is freaking amazing. Every game that I've tested worked, basically. I don't know if so I haven't tested all of my games, but I've tested quite a handful of games on this unit this weekend, basically. Yeah, I'm very happy to report that every game that I inserted into the Retron 5 is working. It's working. People said that there's like 98, 99% compatibility with all games. I'm guessing that's going to be 99, but like 81 games in one cart. Maybe that doesn't work. Remakes of homebrews like Earthbound for the NES, which is very hard to get, works. Like reproduction carts work. I'm happy to say you can look them up. Basically, I'm very happy with that. So, what this does for me, basically, is that I'm going to start collecting again, basically, because of this unit. Because these games are so valuable now. They used to be $1 before the Retron 5 or any other clone system that ever came out. They were like $1. Because of the Retron 5 and all these other clone systems, these games are going to be alive again. And that's why I decided that every time I go into a pawn shop or something like that, and I would pick out an NES game and all that stuff, and I would get I would get, my own physical copy of an NES cartridge and stick it in my collection and play it forever. That is legendary. Oh my gosh, YouTubers. That is legendary. That for collectors, this is a very huge plus because now I'm going to be a collector, and I'm very excited to be collecting NES games and Game Boy games and Super Nintendo games. Oh yeah, the number one game that I want for the Super Nintendo is Donkey Kong Country. That is gonna be very sick when I finally get that game. Basically, but as many of you may wonder, since I don't play the Retro Duo unit anymore, I'm going to give this controller with the unit. And the unit, the Retro Duo unit, goes to, it could go to any of you in the audience, but I decided that the unit, the prize winner of the Retro Duo unit goes to, ding, 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 Christopher Nickel. So, why? Because he has a bunch of Game Boy Advance games, and I'm going to give him a special adapter for all of his Game Boy games to play on the unit, Game Boy Advance games to play on the Retro Duo unit in composite cable, basically. There's no HDMI on the unit, if many of you were wondering. Yeah, that I'm sorry to say none of you won a Retro Duo unit, but yeah, you wouldn't want to play NES games on the unit anyway because they sound like crap. But the Retro Duo unit goes to Christopher Nickel because he's willing to play his Game Boy Advance games really, really bad. And I just could not stand there and watch him, weeping and wishing to play his Game Boy games again. And I had no choice to give the unit to Christopher Nickel. That's the plan. That is the plan, the official plan that we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. So the Retro Duo unit goes to Christopher Nickel. Sorry, YouTubers, none of you won the unit except for Christopher. So, yeah, sorry to say that. Alright, time to wrap up this review. So, a few warnings. Okay, so, the question for all YouTubers is, what type of gamer are you? Basically, what type of gamer are you? Basically, are you the type of gamer who loves emulators and plays these type of games? Because if you love emulators and if you love playing the original games on the original hardware and the original unit, this is a must buy. This is a must buy for all retro gamers out there. The Retron 5 is a must buy in my opinion. Basically, if you're like that. If you love owning the original systems and you don't mind having a clutter of gaming systems in your entertainment center or anything like that, like the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, that's fine. But if you want to play Game Boy games on a TV, then I would suggest getting a regular Super Nintendo or a cheap clone system to play Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. These are the only two that you can actually play with adapters, basically. Not Game Boy Color games. You won't be able to play Game Boy Color games like Pokemon Yellow or something like that. But I'm happy to report. And what type of gamer are you? Are you the type of gamer who loves playing these NES games with higher quality? Then go with the Retron 5. because many of these systems are breaking down, and like the NES, for example, the pin connectors on those things, they're just old and they're useless, and you just want to throw it at the door, basically, because of the original unit. I want to play the Metroid game, the Nintendo game, my Nintendo games on clone systems, basically. So that's my preference. All right. So for emulated people, for Super Nintendo user, for original hardware users, if your systems are dying, then it's time to get a Retron 5. I'm sorry, but it's time to get a Retron 5. That is my preference. So, the final verdict for the Retron 5. Due to 81 in-one carts don't work. Maybe, I don't know, but all of the games that I've tested work, and that is a really exciting thing, YouTubers and all that stuff. So, anyways, the final verdict for the Retron 5 is a legendary 10 out of 10. And I'm hoping to collect more of these games anytime soon. So, that is my verdict. 10 out of 10. I hope you like my verdict and all that stuff. And I'll see you guys on the next episode of the Lincoln Williams Show.